Hey, this is Peter with Unison, and this is the first of 3 videos in which we'll be reconstructing synth patches from Marshmello's track Stars using Marshmello Serum. We're going to be focusing on the bass patches, and then in the next 2 videos we'll be dialing in a few plucks, leads, and chords. So before we go any further, let's just check out the finished patches and then A/B them against the reference. Okay, so we're going to start off by looking at the bass patches. So let's check those out in solo. We've got 2 patches. We know they're separate because earlier in the track here, we hear just the sub playing by itself. Let's check that out. So we know we want to split it up into 2 different patches. Let's listen to each of the finished patches soloed. Here's the sub. Here's the growl. Together. To me, the most distinctive feature of the sound is the rattling rhythmic component on the top. It almost sounds like a playing card in the spokes of a bicycle or running a stick really quickly along the rungs of a fence. There are a few ways we could get that kind of sound. The way I decided to go in this video is to chain a few oscillators together using FM synthesis. So let's check out the patch. I'm just going to isolate the growl. We'll start with that and then we'll add in the sub afterwards. So let's open up a fresh preset. And the first things that we need to do are switch into mono in our voicing menu over here. Only want 1 note at a time, and turn down our random phase so that the attack on every note is identical. And then I'm just going to drop down 1 octave for oscillator A. So this will be our starting point. So if we're just listening for texture, if we were to stick with a saw wave like this, we would just get that kind of Velcro type sound. Not quite what we're looking for. I decided to start off with a Juno wavetable. And this is going to sound pretty far off from what we're aiming for at first. But you'll see that once we start to add some frequency modulation onto this, it gets pretty close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain together oscillator A, oscillator B, and the noise oscillator, all using frequency modulation. I'm going to start off by copying oscillator A to B in our menu up here. So we have the same exact thing going on oscillators A and B, but I'm going to turn down oscillator B's level all the way. And I'm also going to open up our noise oscillator, turn it all the way down, and we can just leave that on AC hum 1. That worked just fine. So we're just hearing oscillator A right now. But I'm going to add in our warp menu here, FM from B. So now this is going to be the source triggering frequency modulation for oscillator A once we turn this up. Somewhere around there. So this definitely sounds a lot closer to what we're going for. I want a little bit, the reference feels spittier to me on the top. It's just like messier on the top. So I wanted to add in some frequency modulation on oscillator B using the noise oscillator as a source. So on our warp menu on oscillator B, just scroll down to FM noise oscillator. And then for tone, I'm just going to use oscillator B's phase here. So I want to push it back in the mix a little bit. I'm going to use some hyper and dimension for that. And also going to use some multi-band compression to sculpt the tone a little bit, add a little bit of EQ. So let's hop over to our FX section here and get started on that. I was fine with the default settings here. I'm just going to dial this down. And then I'm going to add some more depth using the dimension here. There's the growl by itself, with and without the hyper and dimension. See here, it's much more focused now. We want to push it back and make it a little bit more dispersed. Okay, so now let's throw on some multi-band compression. Opened up the compressor here, trigger the multi-band button. The default attack and release ratio sounded fine to me here. I'm just going to change the threshold, add a little bit of makeup gain, and then use the EQs to touch up the tone. Okay, let's compare that. Okay, a little bit of EQ adjustment. I'm gonna add less than 3 decibels to our upper lows here. I'm gonna throw another boost. Somewhere around here. Exaggerate that, see what I'm doing. Just pulling a little bit of that forward, but not much. Just fills out the sound a little bit. Okay, so the FM knob here is super sensitive, so just watch out for that. If you're recreating this and it's not sounding like it sounds in the demo, this is probably the culprit, because it's a continuous function and the screen here just displays discrete numbers, 75, 76, 77%. There's a little wiggle room like within each number, so don't set it by the numbers, set this one by your ear. Here there's quite a lot of change within 76. Okay, so that's pretty close. Let's check out what's going on with the sub. Open up a fresh preset here. Let's just switch our voicing to mono, since we know we only want one note at a time. And let's turn down our random phase again and shift our octave down 1 on oscillator A. So here's our starting point. Alright, so we obviously don't need all that top end. The growl's handling that. We just want to match what's going on more or less below about 250. I ended up going with DS saw and try, as often seems to be the case here. And started off with this wave. which is quite heavy on the fundamental frequency, and the harmonics are a little bit too quiet for my liking. So I decided to open up our edit menu here and edit the actual wavetable. Hit this arrow here and all the harmonics for the wave will display across this grid. And we're just going to reduce bin 1 here, the fundamental frequency. So by turning down the fundamental and turning up our volume, we're essentially just boosting all the harmonics besides the fundamental. So we get the harmonics from the DS-Son tri-wavetable, but now the sound is a bit richer. Let's go ahead and control it with some compression and thicken it up with some distortion. I'm just going to stay in single band mode and change our threshold. Just getting a little bit of control. Throw on some distortion. And asymmetric sounded best here to me. EQ a little bit of a boost in the lows. And now I just want to spread out the sound a little bit using hyper and dimension once again. For hyper, we're going to go with the default settings, but with retrigger on. And just a bit in there. Just going to turn the size down. Just provides a warm bed of sound for the growl to sit in. Here's with and without. Focused pinpoint sound in the center, spreading it out. Here are the two basses together. Okay, let's just check out the MIDI data really quickly. It'll be the same for both parts. And you'll notice that I'm subdividing the long notes like this one here and this one here so that they re-trigger every time the kick would hit. This just sounded a little bit more natural to me because I'm not using drums in the demo. But if you're using drums, you can just make this one long note here, one long note here. That's probably what was done on the actual track. And you just get this sense of re-articulation because the bass is being ducked by the kick. Okay, just two other things. I've got this kick pattern here. It's routing to the sidechain of a compressor. You'll see this is the kick channel here. There's no output, so we're not hearing the kick. It's just sending to the sidechain of this compressor. I'm using the FabFilter Pro C, but you can use any compressor with a sidechain. And I'm routing our sub patch through this compressor so that every time that kick hits, the sub patch is ducked. I'll just play the sub with and without ducking so you can hear the difference. And now I'll engage the kick trigger. Since the growl patch doesn't have much going on in the low frequencies, I decided to just route that directly to the stereo output. I thought it sounded a little bit more powerful that way without going through the ducker. And the only other thing is on this growl patch, I just had to put on a really steep high cut. I'm using a 96 decibel per octave high cut at about 16K. I just didn't have a steep enough filter within Serum, so I added that afterwards. You can use any EQ you want for that, just make it super steep, somewhere around 16K. Alright, that should do it. You'll find links to these bass patches in the description below, and stay tuned for part 2, in which we will be designing the chords and plucks from this song from scratch. This has been Peter with Unison, and the track is Stars by Marshmello. See you in the next video.